Welcome to Podcast 83, a regular look at the news, stories, and trends related to Michigan's 83 counties, from Keweenaw to Monroe, Chippewa to Berrien, brought to you by the Michigan Association of Counties.
Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to Podcast 83, the only podcast put on by the Michigan Association of Counties. Today we're joined by Kyle Caldwell, from the CEO of the Council of Michigan Foundations, and Diana Seeger, President and CEO of Grand Rapids Community Foundation. As you know, these folks know that are joining us today, obviously ARP, ARPA, whatever you want to call it, funding is a hot topic right now. We've been in contact with the Council of Michigan Foundations on ways they can help counties make those funds go as far as possible. And that's going to be an important component as we start getting into using these funds over the next 3 years. And Kyle and Diana are here today to talk a little bit about what they know about ARP funding, what they know about counties statewide, where they're seeing great collaboration occurring. Because what we have found through discussions with some of our counties is there's pockets, there's great collaboration in some areas, and other areas, they don't really know their foundations and what they're doing or what they can do and where they can help out. So that's where Kyle and Diana are gonna help us out with a little bit today. So Kyle, why don't you start us off a little bit, talk about your foundation, your group, a little bit from a statewide level, and then we'll maybe turn it over to Diana and let her talk a little bit about in the Grand Rapids area specifically, some things they're working on.
Oh, great. Well, and first off, let me just thank Mac for putting us all together. It's an important time that we all collaborate and talk about the work that we're doing so that we can really serve Michiganders well. The Council of Michigan Foundations is a nearly 50-year young association representing the philanthropic community in Michigan. We have well over 2,500 foundations in Michigan, well over 300 in our membership, representing 85% of all endowed assets in Michigan. And one of the areas that we are really blessed with in Michigan is that every Michigander is served by a community foundation. We have well over 57 in our membership. And on an annual basis, they grant out over $238 million. And they hold well over $4 billion in assets. And that is a powerful, powerful tool to not only provide resources to nonprofits and communities to solve problems, but community foundations also set tables where other grant makers are trying to figure out similar solutions. And we saw that in the pandemic. And I have one of our members here, Diana Seeger, who herself had put together a table for many decades of area grant makers to look at their local challenges. And when the pandemic hit, they quickly pooled their resources and asked nonprofits, what do you need? How can we help? What are the most dire needs that we should be addressing right now? And acted quickly. And now we're finding that as we think about coming out of the pandemic, hopefully, and as we think about recovery and some of the resources that are available, there's a tremendous amount of knowledge and a tremendous partnership at these tables that philanthropy sets that often include government and many of your members. And we think it's just a prime opportunity to stand back and say, what is the best deployment opportunity for philanthropy's resources, for the public sector's resources? How can we think about taking equity-centered approaches to this funding, not just spreading the funding evenly like peanut butter? What are the strategic ways that we should be thinking about this work? And so Grand Rapids Community Foundation and many others across the state are thinking about that right now and working tables to engage with policymakers to help them shape education funding, economic development funding, public health funding in ways that can be truly transformative. And we're really excited about that.
Well, and this is not a new concept, right? You kind of talked about it a little bit. You've partnered with counties before, local governments before to help out communities in various ways. Obviously, there's more of a spotlight right now on it because of the ARP funding. So Diana, why don't you talk a little bit about what you guys have done in Kent County specifically and what you're maybe looking at doing now with some of these ARP funds or maybe some of the early discussions that are occurring?
Well, first of all, I'm really proud to tell you that the Grand Rapids Community Foundation will be celebrating its centennial next year, and we are really overjoyed about that. And the reason I'm so keyed up about it is the fact that we know how to use the various tools of philanthropy to really help our community. So we created many years ago something called our North Star, and I'm going to read it. For West Michigan to grow and prosper, we must make sure that everyone can apply their talents and creativity to fuel our future. It is only by connecting across perspectives and overcoming inequities that we can build and sustain an inclusive economy and thriving community. This North Star has been embraced by many of nonprofits, our city, our county, and just many businesses. And it is something that really, I would say, we're carrying the torch for that. You know, one of the things that we are really good at is developing what I would say trusting relationships. And we know that connecting people, their passions, and our region's resources, we can work toward a more inclusive and equitable West Michigan. So as Kyle stated, for nearly 30 years, the Community Foundation has been convening area foundations coming together every month. And not only to provide updates, but to sometimes be provocateurs, sometimes to bring in many people from the community to come and talk with us. And many times we have had our county representatives to do that. We have a rich history with with our county of Kent. The county administrator who is retiring, Wayman Britt, who actually was on our board several years ago. So he knows the tools that the Grand Rapids Community Foundation can really leverage. And the fact of the matter is that we know that having great relationships with our governmental entities, we can't do what we need to do without what I would say strong, trusting relationships. And we certainly have built that in Kent County. So I just wanted just a real slice with Kent County over the course of the last really 20 years. We have worked together to provide prevention funding. We have created the Kent School Services Network and something called K-Connect which is a social change type organization. I got to tell you, we could not do, again, our job if it were not for having really strong relationships with our county.
Great, thanks. And you know, you talked specifically, and maybe Kyle, you can chime in a little bit on this. When we start looking statewide, are most of the foundations county specific? Are they more regional? What is it? Just a mix? Because I imagine when you get into more rural areas, they may be multi-county foundations or different ways that our members can connect with some of your members.
Yeah, well, it's a great question. For community foundations, some are multi-county, some are single county, some are community specific, micropolitans. So there's a wide variety of community foundations, but it's important to remember there's more philanthropic vehicles in communities. We have private foundations, family foundations, corporate foundations, all of which can be helpful partners. I think what we're experiencing now is community foundations have set tables for all of those to come together. And so some of them are on a regional basis, multi-county, some are on a single county. What we really saw coming out of the pandemic, however, is that over 50 pooled funds were formed across the state, many of them including our members, including United Ways, and including local units of government, because some of the challenges could not be solved without a public sector partner standing alongside philanthropy to provide the overwhelming needs, and especially as we thought about public health. So I think those same tables are still there now all across Michigan. And I would think that it would be really great for the MAC members to just reach out to us, or to if they don't have a connection with their local community foundation, to open those doors now, especially as we think about shaping some of these dollars. Many of our members have done tremendous research and have best practices working with very knowledgeable nonprofits on some of the core issues that ARP and CARES funding are tooled to address. So there's a tremendous amount of expertise, as well as some resources that could augment this large wave of public resources coming into communities.
Now, as we kind of start looking at the ARP funding and looking back at, looking forward at the ARP funding, looking back at what we learned from the pandemic, and either one of you can kind of chime on this. Are there ideas that you already have? Have you guys started putting together some list of things that you may approach local governments with as far as programs that may be matching programs or ways they can kind of invest in their communities? Have you started that process yet, or is it a little too early?
I will just lean on our immediate history, and that is because we have really what I would say great working relationships with the county, that we were invited in along with some of our private foundation leaders to talk to Emergency Services Committee, that is the distribution of the CARES funding, as well as more recently the United Way with the COVID emergency rental assistance money. So, and our Heart of West Michigan United Way, along with our larger foundations, really have stepped up to the plate. So that, it provided the seed for what will those relationships be like moving forward. And you can be assured that we will lend our voice, our actions, and really emphasize the need for equitable distribution of funds. And I will tell you that when it came to the vaccinations, Kent County led the way with regard to what I would say really, really being aggressive in, not assertive, aggressive, and in certain, to make sure that all vaccinations were available in our large arena, but also, and now that with pop-up sites and leaning on what I would say the faith community to assist us in making sure that the distribution of those vaccines are working out well. So, we've got some recent past history, and we're going to catapult that into the future.
Yeah, great.
For two other examples real quickly here, Steve. So we saw in the pandemic what Diana pointed out was rapid response and very targeted high impact needs being addressed strategically in partnership with philanthropy and government. There are some times when there are unplanned disasters. So when we think about the dam failures in Midland, that required an overwhelming response from FEMA, from local county and local municipalities and philanthropy, and in the middle of a pandemic when everyone had to be social distanced. And it required that everybody come together and say, how do we manage this and deal with 46,000 potentially displaced individuals in a community where they can't come back to those flooded communities for some time. And philanthropy and government stood side by side. And for philanthropy, that's very uncomfortable to get into emergency response. But when the federal dollars were slow to come, philanthropy had to be first dollar in and at least set up the shelters and help with the immediate care that many needed. And, in the midst of the pandemic, our members got together. Diana was included in a working group that helped shape how we should think about the inequities that came out of the pandemic. And three areas came out very clearly. Public health needed a total reinvention. Education and opportunities needed to be delivered in a very different way, and we should learn from that. And what does it mean to provide equitable education opportunities? And the third was economic prosperity. And how do we think about the different ways that all can prosper? And what are the different ways that they need help in participating fully in our economy? So those three areas now have become strong pillars for our members as they think about engaging and thinking about ARP and CARES and future federal funding that comes into communities.
Yeah, that's great. Those are great points to highlight and great ways that you guys have assisted communities. Now, Kyle, what if some of our members don't have very strong relationships with their community foundations or other foundations? What do you recommend where do they go to kind of start those conversations?
Well, certainly we can provide them the contact information, but I think the best way is for for your members to just talk to nonprofits that you work with and try to figure out what is the right way for us to approach other grant makers in the area who you work with. How do you think about those relationships? How do we think about the long term? And then try to start a dialogue. I think the challenge that we have right now is that this large pool of resources coming so fast, and philanthropy is very accustomed to thinking carefully about our approach. What are the ways that we could test different models before we scale? And we're going to have to do all that in real time. So I think reaching out to nonprofit partners that your members already work with, certainly we can be a helpful resource in making those introductions. But it always, I think Diana said it right, it's the relationship forms and bonds and is most effective at the local level.
Yeah, that's great. Is there anything else you guys would like to add before we wrap up?
You know, I thought that the group yesterday that went with the summit that I was involved with my dear friend Bonnie Geddes, who's the president and CEO of the Barrie Community Foundation. You know, we were a great example of a predominantly rural county as well as a suburban urban county, and yet the themes were very similar. And I hope that we connected enough so that the participants really did have a sense of this could really be, community foundations could really be a partner with us, you know, and that it isn't just about financial support, it's about creating the networks and understanding how the distribution of those resources can be done. You know, I would say it's a daunting task for all of the counties in the state of Michigan to figure out how to use the resources that are coming in a way that we can look at this 10 years from now and say, we did it right. So, and we're here and we can really be effective partners.
Well, that was a great segue, Diana, and we didn't even plan that into my shameless plugs for our regional summits coming up. We, of course, had one yesterday. We're recording this on July 20th. We have another summit coming up July 22nd. I'm not sure when we're airing this, so I don't know if this will make it out by then, but we'll also have one coming up in Escanaba next Monday, and then the following Thursday in Gaylord. And then, of course, we'll be having another educational opportunity, our first in-person conference up on Mackinac Island, September 26th through 29th at the Grand Hotel. Folks are excited to get back in person. It was great to see people yesterday. Like Diana said, I think everyone was really excited to see people, and we had a good crew of about 25 or 30 people. So some plugs there. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Diana. We appreciate your time today. What a great story you guys can tell, and what great partnerships are available out there for our county. So thanks, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Podcast 83, brought to you by the Michigan Association of Counties.